First Things, episode number 57.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Trying to be perfect, we try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Hello and welcome to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. So glad to be back with you today, and a late episode again for me. Been at a conference all week dealing with all sorts of statistical issues and analysis and geeky stuff like that, but I found it rather fascinating. It was my first trip ever to Seattle, Washington, and really enjoyed the temperatures there. Reminded me of Hawaii a little bit, mostly in the upper 70s. It was a really good time, but very busy time, and got back kind of late, and here I am putting together the episode a little bit later than I would have liked. But we are continuing our study on Essentialism. This week we are looking through chapter 6, which is about seeing what really matters in life, listening to things, listening to your inner compass, to things that are really essential and important in your life. I was flying back and I decided to take some time to do some little experiments with myself, some things that I would encourage you to do as well. So on my tablet, I have a little stylus that I occasionally write with, and it's okay. You know, it's not nearly as good just writing on a piece of paper, but I decided to do this, and I drew 6 boxes about what really matters. And I started going through this exercise, and I haven't quite finished it yet, but I started doing this. I would encourage you to do something like this. So imagine 2 rows of 3 boxes, 3 boxes across on the bottom row. And in the first box, I want you to label this: what would you do if you had 1 week to live? In that first box, upper left corner. In the middle box of the first row, what would you do if you had 1 month to live? You can just write 1 month to live. And in the top right box, 1 year to live. In the bottom left box, you're going to write 5 years to live, ? In the middle bottom row, a full life to live, ? And then in the bottom right box, you'll write final reflection. I'll try to put a copy of this up if you want to download it at firstthingsproductivity.com/57 as in episode 57. But going across from left to right, what would I do if I had 1 week to live, 1 month to live, 1 year to live? Then in the bottom left, 5 years to live, a full life to live, and then what are my final reflections on this? I think this is a great exercise to do. Many of you might be tempted to do this in your head. And I would encourage you to not just do that. I would encourage you to actually take the time and write it down. Now, I know some of you who listen to me maybe roll your eyes at this point and say, yes, that's so old-fashioned. We have all this new stuff going on. My life is way too busy. I don't have time to do a silly little exercise like that where I actually write it down. But I'm telling you from a lifetime of experiences, feeling exactly that same way. I'm too busy for this type of trivial thing. I don't have time to sit down and write things down and think through an exercise like that. I'll just do it in my head on the way to my job this week. Or as I'm doing something else, I'll think about this. Well, I'm going to tell you, as I've said in previous episodes, we aren't good at multitasking. In fact, we can't multitask. We switch task. And I have a whole episode on multitasking, if you don't believe me, where I quote a lot of research. So while you may be trying to think through this while you're driving, you're not giving your full attention to that, and you are cheating yourself out of a deep insight into your life. The second thing I would say is that there's something magical, almost mysterious, almost mystical about writing things down. I don't know what it is. We're going to do a future study on this topic in some episodes at some point. There's a book out called Write It Down, Make It Happen by Henriette Clauser, and I would love to kind of go through some of that book on this show eventually. I think there's just something mystical about it, something magical, something almost spiritual, or something happens when we write things down. So I would encourage you to go through this exercise, and I was going through this exercise. I didn't finish it yet. I took a whole hour on a plane ride and tried to go through some of this, but that's where I started kind of thinking through what are some of my major things, what really matters to me in life. If I only had 1 month to live, what would I focus on? If I had 1 year to live, what would I focus on? If I had 5 years to live, what would I focus on? And this has been really helpful for me to think through many issues about what is important to me and what is not important to me. And this is basically the emphasis of chapter 6 in the book by Greg McKeown on Essentialism. See what really matters. Look and think through these things. And we need tools like this to help us think through what is really important. We've got to stop hyper-focusing on all of the minor things in our lives. We major on the minors. You've heard that saying many, many times probably. And this is how many of us live our lives. We major on the minor things. We can't step back and see the big picture. But when you phrase it in, I will admit, kind of a depressing way, you only have 1 week to live. Well, that's not good news by saying it that way, because most of us want to live a very long time and live on and on and on and on forever. So when we say stuff like you only have 1 week to live or 1 month to live or 1 year to live, it kind of sounds depressing, but it helps us step back. When someone asks you that question, as I'm asking you right now, and I'm asking you as your friend to take some time and write it down on a piece of paper. If you need to, write it in a computer, type it out. But I don't know, there's just something about writing it in your own handwriting. I know it sounds goofy, but I just want to encourage you to do that. But when you're faced with a question like that, it helps you start majoring on major things and quit being so focused on the minor things, to step back and actually see the bigger picture. But we need tools like this to kind of wake us up, to shake us back into consciousness of what really matters to us the most. Now, if you have cable TV or satellite TV, you know very well that you cannot watch every single show that's on the TV. You have to pick and choose. Even exploring through what's on. I don't know if you've ever done that where you've pulled up the guide, and I have a satellite TV, and if I pull up the guide, I have about 300 channels or something like that. If I actually went through channel by channel through that guide, trying to explore every single channel, it would take me maybe an hour, 2 hours to go through the entire list. Well, by the time I get through the list, I've got to start all over again from scratch because now new things have come on in 30-minute or 1 hour increments. So instead, I have to be very narrow in my focus. I can't explore every single channel. I have to choose which channels I'm going to focus on and which I'm not. So am I in a mood for a movie? Am I in a mood for news programs, for sports program, for music? I have to kind of decide what I'm going after, and then it limits my choices. To discern what is essential requires us to really scan and especially to filter all of these competing messages, all this extra noise among the signal of what we're really wanting to focus on. There are a lot of things that are going to compete with that thing. They're going to give us extra options. They're going to have opinions that sway us toward other things that are distractions from what's really important to us. We must have the insight and the courage to really focus in and to separate all of that noise from the pure signal of what we're after to begin with. But if we don't know what that signal is, then we're not going to know how to turn it off. We're not going to even know what to be listening for. And this is why the exercise I recommended that you do at the beginning of this episode is so important. Because if you know this is my signal, this is what really matters. If I only had 1 year to live on this earth, this is exactly what I would want to do. Well, now you found your signal. And it could be a variety of things. It could be that you write a book. It could be that you spend time with your family, that you go on a vacation with them, that you take them on a trip somewhere. It could be that you become a more gentle person in your approach to people. I mean, it could be a multitude of things, but what really resonates with you? What would you do if you only had 1 year on this planet? Now, once you determine that, you now are much more in tune with the signal that's flowing through your DNA, through the very life force that is known as you on this planet. And now it's much, much easier to hear that signal amongst the noise and to separate it from the noise, whereas before it was just all one big set of noise. It's a matter of listening to what's really important. Here's what Greg says about this in the book. Non-essentialists listen too, but they listen while preparing to say something. They get distracted by extraneous noise. They hyper-focus on inconsequential details. They hear the loudest voice, but they get the wrong message. In their eagerness to react, they miss the point. As a result, they may, using a metaphor from C.S. Lewis, run around with fire extinguishers in times of flood, which I think is a great metaphor that many people who embrace non-essentialism in their life are like running around with fire extinguishers, and it's nothing but flooded areas. And what good is a fire extinguisher doing you in times of flood? It doesn't do you any good. So a non-essentialist is going to be paying attention to the loudest voice. They're going to hear everything being said. It's going to be overwhelming because all of this deluge of information is going to be coming into their lives. But an essentialist is going to pay attention to the signal in the noise. And as we mentioned earlier in this episode, they're going to be focused on the signal because they know what the signal is. They've taken time to know what the signal is. They are going to hear what is not being said. They are going to scan and find the essence of the information. Now, I want to play you a clip of something that I heard recently and just found completely fascinating to me. As many of you know who've listened to me on the show, I am a musician. So I'm always fascinated to hear from other musicians and hear how they live their lives. Well, I ran across a musician who's been around for quite some time. There is, in fact, an entire movie dedicated to this lady. She is a percussionist, and her name is Evelyn Glennie, or Glennie. I'm not sure how she pronounces her last name. She's a percussionist. Now, what's interesting about Evelyn is that she has been profoundly deaf since the age of 12. She started to lose her hearing at the age of 8. Right now, she is about 49 years old as the time of this episode. But she is a musician, and a world-renowned musician in terms of orchestras and percussionist. Now, I find this fascinating because so many people would not associate someone who was deaf with being a musician, even though we have many famous composers like Beethoven who are actually deaf. In fact, in the last decade of Beethoven's life, he was almost totally deaf. He actually gave up conducting and performing in public, but he actually continued to compose. And many of his major works that we know of Beethoven today, he recorded during this period where he was almost totally deaf. And in this talk, Evelyn is going to go through and talk about how to truly listen. Now, I want you to listen to this, and from one, I want you to be inspired. I want you to be inspired by someone who is doing something that many people would think can't be done. So that's the first reason I want to play this clip for you, and you listen to this. But here's a second reason why I want you to listen to this. I want you to listen to this and take to heart what she's talking about, how she listens to music, and how she can, quote, hear music, even though she can't physically hear music. And I want you to relate that to your life, to this whole thing that we're talking about, essentialism, about seeing what really matters, about hearing the signal among the noise. And I want you to take what Evelyn is saying about how she hears music and how she can play music, and I want you to use that as a catalyst in your life to hear the essential things. Because I don't want to make light of her deafness and an analogy, but I do want you to see some parallels with our own lives. Many of us go through our lives completely deaf to the things that really matter to us, the music of our lives. I always say at the end of this show to not die with your music still inside you. And for many of us, we don't know what our music is. We're totally deaf to that music. And I'm not talking about actual music. I'm saying every single one of us has a resonator inside of us. Every single one of us has the essential things. Every single one of us has this symphony inside of us, but many times we're deaf and we can't hear it. And I want you to hear Evelyn talk about how she hears the music in deafness. And we're going to come back and summarize this and end up for today. So let's listen to Evelyn talk about this amazing thing of listening to music and life in general.
Of course, my job is all about listening. And my aim really is to teach the world to listen. That's my only real aim in life. And it sounds quite simple, but actually it's quite a big job, because, you know, when you look at a piece of music, for example, if I just open my little motorbike bag, we have here, hopefully, a piece of music that is full of little black dots on the page. And, we open it up and I read the music. So technically, I can actually read this. I will follow the instructions, the tempo markings, the dynamics. I will do exactly as I'm told. And so therefore, because time is short, if I just play you literally the first maybe 2 lines or so, it's very straightforward. There's nothing too difficult about the piece. But here I'm being told that the piece of music is very quick. I'm being told where to play on the drum. I'm being told which part of the stick to use. And I'm being told the dynamic. And I'm also being told that the drum is without snares. Snares on, snares off. So therefore, if I translate this piece of music, we have this idea. And so on. My career would probably last about 5 years. However, what I have to do as a musician is do everything that is not on the music. Everything that isn't time to learn from a teacher or to talk about even from a teacher. But it's the things that you notice when you're not actually with your instrument that in fact becomes so interesting and that you want to explore through this tiny, tiny surface of a drum. So there we experience the translation. Now we'll experience the interpretation. My career may last a little longer. But in a way, you know, it's the same if I look at you and I see a nice, bright young lady with a pink top on, I see that you're clutching a teddy bear, etc., etc. So I get a basic idea as to what you might be about, what you might like, what you might do as a profession, etc., etc. However, that's just, you know, the initial idea I may have that we all get when we actually look and we try to interpret. But actually, it's so unbelievably shallow. In the same way I look at the music, I get a basic idea, I wonder what technically might be hard, or, you know, what I want to do, just the basic feeling. However, that is simply not enough. And I think what Herbie said, please listen. Listen. We have to listen to ourselves, first of all. If I play, for example, holding the stick, where literally I do not let go of the stick, you'll experience quite a lot of shock coming up through the arm, and you feel really quite, believe it or not, detached from the instrument and from the stick, even although I'm actually holding the stick quite tightly. By holding it tightly, I feel strangely more detached. If I just simply let go and allow my hand, my arm to be more of a support system, suddenly I have more dynamic with less effort, much more. And I just feel at last one with the stick and one with the drum, and I'm doing far, far less. So in the same way that I need time with this instrument, I need time with people in order to interpret them, not just translate them, but interpret them. If, for example, I play just a few bars of a piece of music for which I think of myself as a technician, that is someone who is basically a percussion player, if I think of myself as a musician. is a little bit of a difference there that is worth just thinking about. And I remember when I was 12 years old and I started playing timpani and percussion, and my teacher said, well, how are we going to do this? You know, music is about listening. And I said, yes, I agree with that. So what's the problem? And he said, well, how are you going to hear this? How are you going to hear that? And I said, well, how do you hear it? He said, well, I think I hear it through here. And I said, well, I think I do too, but I also hear it through my hands, through my arms, my cheekbones, my scalp, my tummy, my chest, my legs, and so on. And so we began our lessons every single time tuning drums, in particular the kettle drums or timpani, to such a narrow pitch interval. So something like that of a difference, then gradually and gradually. And it's amazing that when you do open your body up and open your hand up to allow the vibration to come through, that in fact the tiny, tiny difference can be felt with just the tiniest part of your finger there. And so what we would do is that I would pop my hands on the wall of the music room, and together we would listen to the sounds of the instruments and really try to connect with those sounds far, far more broadly than simply depending on the ear. Because of course the ear is, subject to all sorts of things. The room we happen to be in, the amplification, the quality of the instrument, the type of sticks. Etc., etc. They're all different. Same amount of weight, but different sound colors. And that's basically what we are. We're just human beings, but we all have our own little sound colors, as it were, that make up these extraordinary personalities and characters and interests and things. And as I grew older, I then auditioned for the Royal Academy of Music in London. And they said, well, no, we won't accept you because we haven't a clue, of the future of a so-called deaf musician. And I just couldn't quite accept that. And so therefore, I said to them, well, look, if you refuse me through those reasons, as opposed to the ability to perform and to understand and love the art of creating sound, then we have to think very, very hard about the people you do actually accept. And as a result, and once we got over a little hurdle and having to audition twice, they accepted me. And not only that, what had happened was that it changed the whole role of the music institutions throughout the United Kingdom. Under no circumstances were they to refuse any application whatsoever on the basis of whether someone had no arms, no legs. They could still perhaps play a wind instrument if it was supported on a stand. No circumstances at all were used to refuse any entry, and every single entry had to be listened to, experienced, and then based on the musical ability, then that person could either enter or not. And so therefore, this in turn meant that there was an extremely interesting bunch of students who arrived in these various music institutions. And I have to say, many of them now in the professional orchestras throughout the world. The interesting thing about this as well, though, is quite simply that not only were people connected with sound, which is basically all of us, and we well know that music really is our daily medicine. I say music, but actually I mean sound. Because, you know, some of the extraordinary things I've experienced as a musician, when you may have a 15-year-old lad who has got the most incredible challenges, who may not be able to control his movements, who may be deaf, who may be blind, etc., etc. Suddenly, if that young lad sits close to this instrument, and perhaps even lies underneath the marimba, and you play something that's so incredibly organ-like almost. I don't really have the right sticks perhaps, but something like this. Ooh, let me change. Something that's so unbelievably simple, but he would be experiencing something that I wouldn't be because I'm on top of the sound. I have the sound coming this way. He would have the sound coming through the resonators. If there were no resonators on here, we would have he would have a fullness of sound that those of you in the front few rows wouldn't experience, those of you in the back few rows wouldn't experience either. Every single one of us, depending on where we're sitting, will experience this sound quite differently. And of course, being the participator of the sound, and that is starting from the idea of what type of sound I want to produce. For example, this sound. Can you hear anything? Exactly, because I'm not even touching it. But yet, we get the sensation of something happening. In the same way that when I see a tree move, then I imagine that tree making a rustling sound. Do you see what I mean? So whatever the eye sees, then there's always sound happening. So there's always that huge, I mean, just this kaleidoscope of things to draw from. So all of my performances are based on entirely what I experience, and not by learning a piece of music, putting on someone else's interpretation of it, buying all the CDs possible of that particular piece of music, and so on and so forth. Because that isn't giving me enough of something that is so raw and so basic, and something that I can fully experience the journey of. So it may be that in certain halls, this dynamic may well work. It may be that in other halls they're simply not going to experience that at all, and so therefore my level of soft, gentle playing may have to be So because of this explosion in access to sound, especially through the deaf community, this has not only affected how music institutions, how schools for the deaf treat sound, and not just as a means of therapy, although of course being a participator of music, that definitely is the case as well. But it's meant that acousticians have had to really think about the types of halls they put together. There are so few halls in this world that actually have very good acoustics, dare I say. By that I mean where you can absolutely do anything you imagine. The tiniest, softest sound to something that is so broad, so huge, so incredible. There's always something. It may sound good up there, may not be so good there, may be great there, but terrible up there, maybe terrible over there, but not too bad there, etc., etc. So to find an actual hall is incredible, for which you can play exactly what you imagine without it being cosmetically enhanced. And so therefore, acousticians are actually in conversation with people who are hearing impaired and who are participators of sound. And this is quite interesting. I cannot, give you any detail as far as, well, what is actually happening with those halls. But it's just the fact that they are going to a group of people for which so many years we've been saying, well, how on earth can they experience music? They're deaf. We go like that and we imagine that's what deafness is about, or we go like that and we imagine that's what blindness is about. If we see someone in a wheelchair, we assume they cannot walk. It may be they can walk 3, 4, 5 steps. That to them means they can walk. In a year's time, it could be 2 extra steps. In another year's time, 3 extra steps. Those are hugely important aspects to think about. So when we do listen to each other, it's unbelievably important for us to really test our listening skills, to really use our bodies as a resonating chamber, to stop the judgment. For me, as a musician who deals with 99% of new music, it's very easy for me to say, oh yes, I like that piece, oh no, I don't like that piece, and so on. And, I just find that I have to give those pieces of music real time. It may be that the chemistry isn't quite right between myself and that particular piece of music, but that doesn't mean to say I have the right to say it's a bad piece of music. And it's one of the great things about being a musician is that it is so unbelievably fluid. So there are no rules, no right, no wrong, this way, that way. If I asked you to clap, maybe I can do this. If I can just say, please, clap and create the sound of thunder. I'm assuming we've all experienced thunder. Now, I don't mean just the sound, I mean really listen to that thunder within yourselves. And please try to create that through your clapping. Try, just please try. Snow. Snow. Have you ever heard snow? No. Well then, stop clapping. Try again. Try again. Snow.
One finger, guys.
See, you're awake. Rain.
2 fingers.
Not bad. Not bad. The interesting thing here, though, is that I asked a group of kids not so long ago exactly the same question. Now, great imagination, thank you very much. However, not one of you got out of your seats to think, right, how can I clap? Okay, maybe I can use my jewelry to create extra sounds. Maybe I can use the other parts of my body to create extra sounds. Not a single one of you thought about clapping in a slightly different way, other than sitting in your seats there and using 2 hands. In the same way that when we listen to music, we assume that, it's all being fed through here. This is how we experience music. Of course, it's not. We experience thunder, thunder, thunder. Think, think, think. Listen, listen, listen. Now, what can we do with thunder? I remember my teacher, when I first started my very first lesson, I was all prepared with sticks ready to go. And instead of him saying, okay, Evelyn, please, feet slightly apart, arms at a more or less 90-degree angle, sticks in a more or less V shape, keep this amount of space here, etc. Please keep your back straight, etc., etc., etc. Whereas just probably going to end up absolutely rigid, frozen, and I would not be able to strike the drum because I was thinking of so many other things. He said, Evelyn, take this drum away for 7 days, and I'll see you next week. So, heavens, what was I to do? I no longer required the sticks. I wasn't allowed to have these sticks. I had to basically look at this particular drum, see how it was made, what these little lugs did, what the snares did, turned it upside down, experimented with the shell, experimented with the head, experimented with my body, experimented with jewelry, experimented with all sorts of things. And of course, I returned with all sorts of bruises and things like that. But nevertheless, it was such an unbelievable experience, because then where on earth are you going to experience that in a piece of music? Where on earth are you going to experience that in a study book? So we never, ever dealt with actual study books. So, for example, one of the things that we learn when we are dealing with being a percussion player as opposed to a musician is basically straightforward single-stroke rolls. Like that. And then we get a little faster. And a little faster. A little faster. And so on and so forth. What does this piece require? Single-stroke rolls. So why can't I then do that whilst learning a piece of music? And that's exactly what he did. And interestingly, the older I became, and when I became a full-time student at a so-called music institution, all of that went out of the window. We had to study from study books. And constantly the question, well, why? Why? What is this relating to? I need to play a piece of music. Oh, well, this will help your control. Well, how? Why do I need to learn that? I need to relate it to a piece of music. I need to say something. Why am I practicing paradiddles? Is it just literally for control, for hand-stick control? Why am I doing that? I need to have the reason, and the reason has to be by saying something through the music. And by saying something through music, which basically is sound, we then can reach all sorts of things to all sorts of people, but I don't want to take responsibility of your emotional baggage. That's up to you when you walk through a hall, because that then determines what and how we listen to certain things. I may feel sorrowful or happy or exhilarated or angry when I play certain pieces of music, but I'm not necessarily wanting you to feel exactly the same thing. So please, the next time you go to a concert, just allow your body to open up, to allow your body to be this resonating chamber. Be aware that you're not going to experience the same thing as the performer is. The performer is in the worst possible position for the actual sound, because they're hearing the contact of the stick on the drum, or the mallet on the bit of wood, or the bow on the string, etc., or the breath that's creating the sound from wind and brass. They're experiencing that rawness there, but yet they're experiencing something so unbelievably pure, which is before the sound is actually happening. Please take note of the life of the sound after the actual initial strike or breath is being pulled. Just experience the whole journey of that sound in the same way that I wished I'd experienced the whole journey of this particular conference rather than just arriving last night. But I hope maybe we can share one or two things as the day progresses.
So I hope you were inspired by Evelyn's talk, and I hope you started seeing some parallels and some analogies over into our own lives, to where we can look and see what really matters, that we can hear the music that resonates inside of us. And she said over and over again, as she said in the latter part of her speech, the next time you go to a concert, just allow your body to open up. Allow your body to be this resonating chamber. The other thing that she mentioned is how so many of us think that we experience music only through our ears, but actually we experience it in a multitude of ways. In my car, I have a subwoofer, and if you don't know what a subwoofer is, it makes the bass really loud. And I don't listen to bass-heavy music like hip-hop or rap music very often. I'm more of a rock type of guy, and I like classical and new age type of stuff too. And I listen to a lot of things. I don't listen, like I said, to rap as much, but I love feeling the bass. And I find it fascinating that I like to feel it against me. And if you've ever been to a concert now that has these subwoofers, you can actually feel when they play the drums or play the bass guitar, you can actually feel it moving your body. And I don't always like that, to be honest with you, but at the same time, I like to feel music. And I don't know if you've ever thought about the fact that you feel music inside you. So think about how you can apply this talk by Evelyn to your life, about what we're talking about here, finding that signal of your life among the noise. And the basic thing that, there's many things that we could do to apply what she said, but the basic thing is we need to involve our entire body. And this goes back to what I said earlier, to the little exercise of writing down what you would do if you only had 1 year to live in life and things like that. But to really write it down. Write it down with your physical body. Speak it out loud to avoid the judgment of what things mean and don't mean, but involve your total person in this. The best way to pay attention to the signal in the noise is to devote all of yourself to that. Not just your brain and your thinking, but all of it. That includes your eyes, that includes your nose, your ears, your mouth, your any sensation. Involve all of it. So for instance, let's say that your interest is in writing a book. Well, you need to pay attention to that signal in the noise of this life, everything that's going to keep you away from writing a book. So that means you need to fill your life with things that are going to stimulate you to write a book. You should listen to podcasts like this that encourage you to pursue your passions. You should listen to maybe some podcasts that talk about writing a book. Maybe you should sign up for some classes that talk about how to write a book or how to write a book proposal. Maybe you should watch some videos that talk about this very thing. Maybe you should get a recorder or your phone and talk through it and start journaling your thoughts about what you're doing. Maybe you should start a podcast and talk about your journey in becoming an author and some of the struggles that are going through. Maybe you should use your hands and devote an hour a day to just type and just write. And do this without thinking about it, but just do it for 15 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, 1 hour a day, where you constantly are just going to write without judgment. Just write from 1 minute to the next minute and just go for it. And you're using your body. See, in every way, you're using your ears, you're using your eyes, you're using your mouth. Maybe you can use your nose and take out some books and smell it and then envision what your book is going to smell like. I mean, just involve every single one of your senses to that signal, encouraging it, feeding it, paying attention to it, drowning out all of the other noise in your life. You say you want to be a better manager because seeing other people live out their passions, living out their potential invigorates you. It stimulates you, it excites you, and you want to do that. Well, again, involve every single sense in your body to making that happen. So again, listen to a podcast like this. Listen to other podcasts on leadership. Read a book. Involve your eyes in reading something about how people have really done this well. Journal down your thoughts. Think about what you want to do. Write it down. You know, Greg actually mentions journaling in the chapter of his book as one way to really flesh this out because humans just forget things. And if you don't believe that, then tell me what you ate for dinner 2 weeks ago on Thursday. And most of us, if you think about it, we're not really sure what we ate. Or think about 3 months ago on the second Tuesday of that month, what did you eat? And many of us may not know if we didn't write it down. Or think back 3 weeks ago on a Monday, what all meetings were you involved in at your job? Many of us don't know. As the old saying goes, the faintest pencil is better than the strongest memory. Now, here's some advice that Greg gives for giving a good start into journaling. He says, for the last 10 years now, I have kept a journal using a counterintuitive yet effective method. It is simply this. I write less than I feel like writing. Typically, when people start to keep a journal, they write pages the first day. Then by the second day, the prospect of writing is so much is daunting, and they procrastinate or abandon the exercise. So apply the principle of less but better to your journal. Restrain yourself from writing more until daily journaling has become a habit. I also suggest that once every 90 days or so, you take an hour to read your journal entries for that period. But don't be overly focused on the details like the budget meeting 3 weeks ago or last Thursday's pasta dinner. Instead, focus on the broader patterns or trends. Capture the headline. Look for the lead in your day, your week, your life. Small incremental changes are hard to see in the moment, but over time can have a huge cumulative effect. So for homework next week, I want you to think about how you can better see what really matters, how you can better hear the signal among the noise in your life. What are things that you can do to accentuate the music in your soul? What can you do this week to make it happen? What can you do this week, tomorrow, in fact, to actually implement more emphasis on what really matters the most to you? How can you fill your life, if you can, almost every sense in your physical and spiritual being? What can you do to fill your life with that signal, that essential thing that resonates with you? What can you do? And if you have any great ideas of things that you have done, I would love to hear about it. Leave me a comment at firstthingsproductivity.com/57, or leave it on my Twitter account or on Facebook, or send me an email at me@brandonvaughn.com. Let me know. I would love to know some of the things that you are doing to put first things in your life. What are you doing that is filling your life full of what really matters the most? And I'm particularly interested in those of you who are doing things in areas that are maybe less obvious of how you can fill your life with it. So yes, I can see areas in which, if you're writing a book, how you can fill your life with that. If you're writing music, how you could fill your life with that. But what about other things in your life? Like being a better manager, like being a better parent. What are you doing in those areas? I would love to know. I would love to know what things you are pursuing in your life, what you wrote down on your list of what you would do if you only had 5 years to live or 1 year to live. What's on your list, and what are you doing creatively to fill your life full of those things? I would love to know, because I just am on this journey with you, and I want to learn from you as well as to pass it on to other people and say, wow, this person's doing this. And maybe if you let me know, leave me a comment or voice message or anything, then I'll let other people know about it on the show as well, because I would love to know how you are pulling it off in your life so you can be an inspiration to me and others as well. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode on seeing what really matters in your life. As always, I would love any comments for those who listen to me on iTunes, any ratings. You've heard me say that forever, and I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I'm kind of getting tired of talking about this. Plug my show. But it helps. And then if you're so inclined, would love to hear from you. I don't really care how many ratings I have, to be honest with you. I could have 1 rating. I could have 500 ratings. I just want to hear from people. I think this is one of the areas that I'm going to try to put a little bit more emphasis in, especially as we get closer to the winter months, is to really connect more with you guys in some way. I don't really care about the ratings and the popularity. I care more about connecting with you guys and hearing what's resonating with you, hearing what's going on in your life, what's helping you, what questions you have, and also your insights of what's working in your life, because that is inspiration to me and to others as well. So until next time, do the exercise I said at the beginning. Go do that. I dare you to. Take out a piece of paper, write it on some computer screen, but write it with your physical hand and start writing the exercise of what you would do if you only had a little bit more time on this earth. What really matters to you the most? Where are you going to spend your time? And I love the way that we phrase it, if you had 5 years to live, because if many of us had 5 years to live, we would probably still do work and make some income. We probably wouldn't just go travel all over the world. Some of us might. That may be what we would even put in our 5-year plan. But I want you to think about what you would do even if you were to stay in some type of career job. What would you do differently? How would you approach your work differently? And think about those things. And as always, embrace today with passion and intention. And don't die with your music still inside you.